event. It's kind of an event that we've put together. There's the Thurrock local Children's Safeguarding Board involved, Thurrock CVS, which is Council for Voluntary Services, involved. There's Thurrock Safeguarding Adults involved. So we've kind of all come together. There's a Children's Trust Board involved in looking at, as an authority, what we're doing about safeguarding children and vulnerable adults. And the main issue is to equip practitioners, people who work with children, young people and their families, an opportunity to feel confident that they know what the authority is saying in terms of how to protect these groups of people, and furthermore to help them to know more about the new vetting and barring scheme that's come into operation from the 12th of October.
Because it is quite a complicated scheme coming in with the vetting and barring, so it must be nice to get people more aware and understand it better, and these workshops, I guess, work very well.
Yes, I mean basically the format of the day, and we have over 180 people from all the different sectors. We've got people from the voluntary, community, faith, statutory sector, which is, local council. We've got people from the NHS, we've got the police and so on. Coming together in these workshops. We split them into two workshops where we call them a question and answer session, where they can actually ask specific questions about the particular scheme that's coming that's already come into place on the 12th of October, giving them clarification. So the format has been, in the morning we've had an address from Simon Morrison from the Home Office that's given us what the scheme is exactly about, because there has been quite a lot of media interest, and as you know, with the media, they're not necessarily going to give you the aspects that will be most helpful to people. They're just trying to sell papers. So he's given us an address in terms of correcting some people's misconceptions about what the vetting and barring scheme is about, and how the Independent Safeguarding Authority are kind of planning to do that. And then we've gone into question and answer sessions where people have asked specific questions about their concerns, about clarification, and then hopefully we've had a panel of people both from Thurrock, people like the manager of the LSCB and the Thurrock Adult Safeguarding Board and the designated assigned person for safeguarding in Thurrock here to answer all their questions.
So that's because there's so much, as you're saying, there's so much going on, so it must be such a successful event as well. You must be quite happy that you
I'm very happy. Firstly, I'm very happy with the collaboration, integrated working. That's really one of the messages that today has been able to prove that we can work together on a common issue. Safeguarding is everybody's agenda. It's not just a voluntary sector agenda or local authority agenda. It's everybody's agenda, and to have everyone coming together today to work on how we actually sort of prepare ourselves really to safeguard children, young people and vulnerable adults in Thurrock is really very, very important to us, and I'm very pleased, with the turnout. The other thing that the other workshop has been looking at is the ways in which people can actually post on a sort of community online forum, how questions that they might have, information that we can put on about what's happening, in addition obviously to other routes that they can have questions answered within the local authority about safeguarding issues.
So you hope it's going to be a good outcome at the end of the day?
Yeah, the outcome for me would be on the evaluation form, if I can read people saying things like, I much care about the vetting and barring, I know how to prepare my organisation for it, and the workers and the volunteers that we employ, how they will be registered onto the scheme. If I can sort of see those kind of strands coming through, or at least I know where to go or who
to come speak to you today. The first slide then, slightly over logoed, but I think quite important, because for me this demonstrates just how complex this system is and the need that it has for cooperation, not only across government but through stakeholders as well. And what I mean by that is, you'll see I've got 5 slides up on there, 5 logos up on the slide. The first one is the Home Office, who I represent. And the reason the Home Office are involved in safeguarding is because the new vetting and barring scheme has brought in not only new rules and regulations, but new penalties and duties as well. and since the Home Office holds within its portfolio that whole law and order and enforcement stream, we have the responsibility for ensuring that this new scheme works. But we can't do this on our own. And the other two top line logos, the Department for Children, Schools and Families and the Department of Health, illustrate those main government departments that have created the policy and driven through the legislation to ensure more children and vulnerable adults can be properly protected. But it's all very well saying, great, we've got central government departments on board. We realise that's not enough. We need help not only of you and your organisations out there, but of other agencies as well. And that leads me to my last two logos on the slide. The first is one that you're no doubt all very familiar with already, the CRB, the Criminal Records Bureau. And they're important because of the experience and relationships they already have in processing data, criminal data and other information that people can use to make informed decisions about where individuals may pose a risk. And that leads me on to the final logo, perhaps less familiar, the Independent Safeguarding Authority, or ISA. The new arm's-length body is what some might probably call a quango, that's been set up to do one key task, and that is to make legally binding decisions of who should or should not be able to work with children and vulnerable adults. Now, as Amy's already said, there has been a lot about this in the press quite recently. And there's a lot of misunderstanding in the press. Some of it deliberately so, because it helps promote certain agendas. But what I can tell you now, in a very straightforward manner, is what this scheme isn't. It isn't about bringing rules in which say you've got to get registered before you take your kids to school. It isn't about having some new kind of scheme which means you've got to go through a process, otherwise you won't be able to give your son's friends a lift to the football match. And it isn't about stopping people going about their normal family business. Instead, what it is a proportionate response to a real problem. And if you take away a simple definition of what really lies behind this scheme, I think it should be this. This is a scheme that's been brought in to bring regulation to those formal situations, both in paid employment and in the voluntary sector, where people who hold those paid, employed or voluntary positions can build up relationships of trust with vulnerable people, with children. Relationships of trust which an abuser could misuse. So what this scheme is about is identifying those people who pose a risk and taking them out of the workforce. That's the basic principle behind it. How we do it is a little bit more complicated. Have the second slide, please, David. So, the core purpose then, as I've just said, is to prevent unsuitable people from working with children or vulnerable adults. And the new vetting and barring scheme is going to be doing this by reforming current vetting and barring practices. So we've already done some of that. The POCA List 99 lists, which you are no doubt well familiar with, which banned people from working with vulnerable groups, have now gone. There are now two new separate but aligned lists held by the Independent Safeguarding Authority. One list that bars people from working with children, and one list that bars people from working with vulnerable adults. Those people who were on the old lists were looked at by the ISA and then migrated across to the new lists. So the people who are barred are still barred. They're just barred under new and much more far-reaching criteria. And that's important because the new scheme not only cuts down on the number of lists, means you have one organisation making decisions and making sure that the lists are securely maintained, but it also covers a much bigger workforce than the POCA or List 99 systems ever did. Now we've expanded to cover big chunks of the country that weren't covered before. Things like the NHS, things like the prison service, groups that didn't fall under the old legislation. Now I've said there are two separate lists, one for children, one for vulnerable adults. But it's important to understand that